Think I should be live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to In the Bag, episode 6. Some of you may have noticed that I was unable to stream the last 2 Fridays. The first Friday had a personal thing. The second Friday, long story short, I am cat sitting for a family member in a different state. So I've got a totally different setup right now. I brought what I could with me, but it's changed up my whole routine for the time being. But I wanted to uh, bring what I can and set up what I can. I'm using StreamYards for the moment for this instead of OBS, which is fine. But I mean, at least you'll get my my avatar. Um, rather than the book covers. But all of that said, I took the opportunity of the plane ride to finish book, or rather part 3 of Dune. And what a ride, guys. Absolutely loved it. Feels good to be a person that has read Dune. I say that, but the folks that have read all of Dune, meaning, what is it? Technically 6 books. I've not read the trilogy, but I've read the first book. So I've read Dune, and it feels good. I didn't really take wonderful notes. I didn't have much of a way to do that, at least not in the way I would have liked. So I tried to sort of scramble my notes as best I could in a document on my, a Gmail draft. And I thought I would go through it. There was a 2-year time gap between the second part of the book and the third part is one of the big things that you learn relatively quickly. And you get a couple of excellent villain chapters. You get Feyd-Rautha trying to kill the Baron, but it fails. And the Baron is disconcerted. He's frustrated. He feels he still has a lot to teach Feyd-Rautha, that Feyd-Rautha is not ready. And he tries to demonstrate this to Feyd-Rautha. And Feyd-Rautha is sort of that rebellious, punk, arrogant type figure. Nevertheless, they come to an uneasy truce. And then we get a chapter in which Howate and the Baron chat. And I feel I've expressed it before. Howate, for me, having seen Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2, the movies, Howate is one of the more exciting elements of the book for me because I have or had no idea how he was going to affect the story. In what way? And I like Howate. I feel bad for him. He was manipulated, but he seems like such a nice guy. At the very least, he's loyal to the family that I am, for the most part, in support of. So I was eager to see how that plot line would resolve. And what we get from this interaction is that both are intent in combating the Emperor. So between divvying up the blame between the Emperor and the Harkonnens, it seems like Howate puts more blame on the Emperor and will derive more satisfaction from helping the Harkonnens defeat the Emperor rather than just lashing out at the Harkonnens because they happen to be right there. They talk about Salusa Secundus and which is the Emperor's prison planet, I guess, where he trains the Sardaukar. And Howate throws out the idea of turning Arrakis into a prison planet and using prison labor or slave labor to mine the spice. And that's a really interesting thought. And there were some reasons explained why that might be disconcerting to the emperor, as if it's a secret that the Sardaukar are possibly slaves. Um, I don't remember the specifics of it, just that I found it intriguing. And then there's, of course, this element of, is this Hawait earnest in offering this advice because it'll stop the emperor, or because he thinks it might backfire on the Harkonnens? Really interesting stuff that I suppose could be up for interpretation. Paul struggles to be in the present because he's eating a lot of spice. Jessica doesn't particularly like Chani. She prefers Hara. Hara's an interesting character. Uh, she gets, what, like 2 chapters in this part. I like her. She seems, what's the word? She seems to be sort of devoted to Paul. She understands her place, I guess you could say. It comes out at one point in the chapter that she does feel very protective of Alia. And Alia is weird, very weird, and disconcerting for everyone. Most people are sort of freaked out by this 2-year-old, give or take, however much, with the intelligence or wisdom or lived experience of someone who has multiple lives within them. Alia is a fascinating character, and Frank Herbert does a really wonderful job of characterizing her. The way she says things that sound strange coming from a child and intimating how people react to it. So I like Alia so far. We learn that Paul has a son, Leto. And this was a weird point for me because I'm aware, generally speaking, of what occurs in future books. So throughout this, pretty much every mention of Leto in this book, the son, I had presumed to be the Leto of future books. So that was a unique experience to me, not knowing the events of future books would almost certainly lead to a different experience going through the book, and I acknowledge that. But for me, it led to that unique expectation that didn't happen. Paul is about to perform a rite of passage, something that I guess young Fremen younger than him, certainly, do. He's going to ride a worm, and Stilgar is supervising. Jessica's worried for Paul. Hara is devoted to Paul. Alia is weird AF, and that one I put in all caps. And we learn that the Fremen more and more are wanting Paul to kill Stilgar and take control. So people are seeing him more and more as a leader, as one of them, as the Lisan al-Gaib. And it is the Fremen way that if the leader is killed by someone, that the person that killed them or challenges them really becomes the leader. Interesting to note that the book essentially ends with a duel. Not that he kills the leader, but he kills someone who duels on behalf of the leader. So just a little interesting connection there, I suppose. Paul rides the worm, and he's more or less successful. Before making the attempt, Stilgar warns him not to do any tricks, not to do anything fancy, try to guide the worm any particular place for show, and Paul does it, and it's he doesn't do what Stilgar tells him not to. I mean, he rides the worm, and he it's a really wonderful passage where he's like, "This is beautiful. I can see why people might want to try and show off and do handstands and whatever." Let's see. So Paul rides the worm, and Stilgar chastises Paul for poor placement in uh, setting himself up to hop onto the worm, essentially. So I guess he put himself by a specific type of sand, and if he were to do that without an escape route, he was supposed to signal for someone else to call the worm away in case the worst should happen, which Paul didn't do. And I remember thinking that Paul got uniquely frustrated by Stilgar's chastisement here. That was noteworthy to me. I enjoyed it. Stilgar is aware the Fremen want Paul to kill him, which I'm sure is a very uncomfortable place for Stilgar to be. Paul, because it's his day, it's his rite of passage, he's essentially, I think it's such that he was like made leader for the day or something to that effect. Basically, Paul can choose where to ride the worm. And for the moment, Paul, I think, if I recall correctly, wants to ride south. He wants to see his son. He wants to see Chani. So they head south, and Stilgar doesn't really want to do that. And I don't remember if it's because Stilgar thinks that's where Paul will challenge him or not, but Stilgar doesn't want to do that. But Paul insists they go south, at least as long as Paul's the one that gets to decide. And on the way, they see smugglers. They don't know, I think, immediately that they're smugglers. They just see an ornithopter or something to that effect. And there's a confrontation. The Fremen set a trap for the smugglers, and the smugglers happen to be run by Gurney. So Paul and Gurney meet again. Very exciting, very touching reunion. Gurney stands down almost immediately and signals to Paul that there are some who are not to be trusted among his men, Gurney's men. As it turns out, those men are Sardaukar, and they're captured. And I don't think they knew at the time that the men that couldn't be trusted were Sardaukar specifically. So there was a fight that ensued of some kind, and in the that preceding moment of danger between when Paul speaks with the Sardaukar and when there's chaos, Stilgar protects Chani, and ostensibly he does that for Paul. Like, that's what Paul would have wanted, or something to that effect. Paul really does not want to kill Stilgar. And it's noted here that Gurney still thinks Jessica is the traitor. I guess Paul and Gurney probably talked about Jessica, however briefly, and Gurney has a lot of thoughts that he does not hash out with Paul then and there. Paul speaks to a gathering of Fremen. He tells them that ways change. So this essentially is the big plan. I guess this is something that he had planned with Stilgar and with Jessica. He's going to make a big speech. He accepts more or less the mantle of Lisan al-Gaib. He shows them Gurney, and he reasserts his place as Duke of Arrakis. He refuses to kill Stilgar, and the reason I say that this is sort of pre-planned is that uh, Paul has Stilgar kneel and take an oath, and I think it's Jessica that thinks to herself, that wasn't what we talked about happening. Nevertheless, Stilgar takes the oath, and Paul expertly manipulates the Fremen, the crowd. Ways change. Paul goes to reintroduce Jessica and Gurney, but Gurney holds a knife to her back, and he is exceptionally close to killing Jessica then and there. Paul has a difficult time talking Gurney down. He explains that Yui was the traitor. He explains that there is proof, a message from Yui specifically, but that proof's not there. It's a very, very tense situation. And once that's all settled, Gurney sings. And Paul, who had initially sent for a war council of some kind, is like, I'll join them in a minute. I want to hear Gurney sing. And the three of them have a really heartwarming, tender moment. And I could be wrong. I think this is essentially the last sweet moment of calm we get before we, the audience, get, at least, before the end of the book. It's fairly tense the rest of the way, I think, with few exceptions. We hop forward in time a little bit. Chani is rushed back from the south. Excuse me. Paul has secretly been in a coma, essentially for about 3 weeks or so. And Jessica doesn't know what to do. There's concern. Very few, some of the Fedaykin know about it. And it's sort of a dangerous line to walk here. 3 weeks is a long time to be out. Chani wakes Paul up with raw water of the maker. And it's sort of like, gosh, what's the Epsom salts, smelling salts? The thing that like you wave under your nose and it wakes you up. It has that kind of effect on Paul because he wakes up and he thinks that he was out for moments. He doesn't realize, it's a shock to him when they tell him he's been out for 3 weeks. Paul connects with his mother. He can enter where the Reverend Mother cannot. And I think this has to do with the genetic memory recall thing. He can see the ancient place that gives and the ancient place that takes. And I think what that is something to the effect of the masculine takes and the feminine gives. And as it has been, the women, the Bene Gesserit, can only see the place that gives, in part because they are the feminine. And if I understand any of the high-minded intellectual stuff that I'm definitely not smart enough to fully comprehend, or rather just to comprehend, I guess this means that Paul is in fact the Kwisatz Haderach, which is what the Bene Gesserit have been trying to breed, someone who can access both. He sees the future present, future/present, both, At the same time, something. The Emperor is on Arrakis with several legions, I think 5. Uh, and one of the Fedaykin overhears the conversation, which this element is here to further serve the religious expanding lore mythos of Paul Muad'Dib, the Lisan al-Gaib. And then from here on out, it's really, really exciting stuff. I couldn't put the book down from this point onward, and I finished it more or less in one sitting from here on out. Paul, Stilgar, and Gurney are looking out at the Emperor's metal structure on Arrakis, and it's this big, imposing thing. It's a great show of wealth. The Emperor has a lot of money. I think one character at one point, it might be the Baron, thinks derogatorily of many of the Emperor's attendants. The phrase roughing it on Arrakis or something to that effect is made when it's thought of sort of ironically, this idea that what this metal structure and what the Emperor brings with him could be conceived of as roughing it. A storm is coming, and Frank Herbert keeps hammering away at this is a great grandmother of a storm, a great great grandmother of a storm. It's a big storm. And everyone is preparing and waiting for the right moment to strike. Let's see, Paul laments that Stilgar is becoming a worshiper and not a friend. And this is the first of several thoughts like this about a handful of different people. From this point on, people begin to really treat Paul differently. People that Paul wishes they wouldn't. Stilgar, Gurney at one point, Jessica. It's rather sad. The Sardaukar that they had captured are released, and they make it to the Emperor and tell the Emperor about Paul. The Emperor raises the Chom flag, signaling that he doesn't care who controls Arrakis. His support goes to who can make money. And that's noted as a subtle bit of work on the Emperor's part. I liked that. It was neat. Bit of politicking. Stilgar doesn't really get it or understand it, but Gurney and Paul do. So essentially the plan, excuse me, the plan is for Paul to use nukes, atomics, to break the shields. And it's against the rules to use nukes against people. But Paul asserts that there's nuance here, that they're using the atomics against the shields, not the people. And he's going to rely on that nuance to defend him from attacks, I guess you could say, denunciations, that kind of thing. Paul gets word that there was a raid on Siege Tabor. Leto was killed and Alia was taken captive. And as I mentioned earlier, I had presumed that the Leto mentioned was the Leto of future books. So I read that and thought, that'll be a neat reveal later on when it turns out he's not dead. Boy, was I surprised when I finished the book and he was still dead. Rest in peace, Leto. And that does affect Paul. Jessica has a thought about how it affects Paul later on that felt weighty to me. I mean, why shouldn't it? How couldn't it? But of course, uh, Paul has a lot going on at that moment, and he sort of has to stifle it for the time being and focus on the task at hand. Then we get our final Baron chapter. The Baron grovels before the Emperor. The Emperor wants to know where Hawait is. I guess the Baron had sent him off to do something or other, and he feigns concern for Hawait and explains about how Hawait has a slow-acting poison working its effects on him that will only be delayed if he takes the antidote regularly. So Hawait is... It sounds like he's more or less doomed. The Emperor questions the Baron about detected greenery on the southern part of Arrakis and about Muad'Dib, and the Baron's ignorance or willful ignorance or any number of things is sort of thrust to the fore. The Baron is a bit of a pitiful sight here in front of the Emperor. The Emperor thinks that the Emperor talks about using hostages against the Fremen, and the Baron's like, that doesn't work. If we take hostages, those people are treated as if they are already dead. These guys are crazy. They're fanatics. And the Emperor's like, well, maybe you haven't tried the right hostages. And then Alia walks in. And Alia has a certain degree of freedom, let's say, within this room. It's a bit strange to me. I don't think there was any talk of her like being bound, although why would you bound a child? But clearly there's something disconcerting about her, so why wouldn't you? It read to me as if she had some degree of free reign. She was perfectly calm during the encounter, and at one point she's like saying very adult things, but she's swinging her legs like a child. So maybe it was that gave me the impression that she was perfectly calm and not bound in any way. The Baron is completely disconcerted by her, the way she carries herself, the way she speaks with the soft palate, but the things she says. And there's a line in which he wonders if she's a little person. And that was, I laughed fairly hard. The book used a more derogatory term nowadays, I think, which somehow seemed to fit the Baron. I laughed. Mohiam is freaked out by Alia, like legitimately freaked out, calls her an abomination. She wants Alia dead, just like erased, gone. The Emperor thinks that she can read minds. Alia can read minds. Alia denies this. It's a really interesting thing to me that the Emperor sort of... The parts of the conversation where he treats her like a child, but at the same time, it's less treating her like a child and more treating her like a captive. He otherwise speaks to her, I think, like an adult. And that was fascinating. It's like there's no mention of him being disconcerted by her. He treats her... The book doesn't go out of its way to claim that the Emperor treats her with respect, but there is a certain degree, a matter of factness in the way that the emperor addresses her that I found really interesting. But Alia denies that she can read minds because she can't, because she's doing something differently. And she says something like, because I wasn't born like you, I can't think like you do, as her way of explaining it. The emperor thinks that the Baron was an ally with Duke Leto at one point, which was interesting to me. I didn't think too deeply on it or how that would have worked or why he thought it, or at least I can't recall it at the moment. But I liked that that was a consideration of the Emperor's. And I'm already thinking we're getting a bit more of the Emperor here than we did in the movie. I would have loved to see some of this or more of this. We really didn't get much Christopher Walken, sadly. The room rumbles. Presumably, that's the attack happening, the atomics. And I forget specifically where it is. I know I wrote a note to myself at the end of my notes to remind myself of this, but a bunch of Fremen ride in with sandworms at one point during the assault. And I remember thinking, man, that is amazing. That is so cool. Alia runs to Grandfather Baron, like she calls out grandfather and runs to him during the shaking, and then she scratches him, which is essentially killing him. He is like paralyzed and drops to the floor, and she refers to herself as the Atreides Gom Jabbar, or she has a needle. So I was slightly uncertain here if the needle itself was the Gom Jabbar that was owned by the Atreides, or if she was referring to herself like she's an assassin of some kind, or something to that effect, in which she was saying that she was the Gom Jabbar. My first read through, it was the needle interpretation. My second read through, not second read through, my perusal, taking notes for myself, had me ask that question. So if anyone's listening to this and has an opinion on that element, I would love to hear what other folks have to say on that specific line. The noses of the spaceships are blown off, and the Emperor can't retreat to space. The Emperor is surrounded by Sardaukar, his daughter, and two guild agents. He notes that the guild agents don't know how it will go, presumably the confrontation or the near future, but neither does Muad'Dib. And one of the guildsmen's eyes, I guess a contact lens or something, had fallen out, or a goggle or something. One of the eyes is so dark blue, it's nearly black, and this disconcerts the Emperor. And I think that was a great little passage there, him being disconcerted by how blind the guildsmen must be to the present because of their reliance on the spice and their view of the future. Mohiam and the Emperor send for Count Fenring, and they're going to try to win by treachery of some kind, essentially. Fenring! Cannot wait to get to that stuff. Paul and his entourage walk through the old governor's mansion, once the home of his father, and then Raban. Paul asks about the damage, brushes it off as nothing money won't repair, and Gurney is essentially disconcerted that Atreides would be more worried about money issues and property and that kind of damage when lives were at stake. And a small part of me was worried about Paul and Gurney's relationship from this point on. And I think it's similar for Paul, or at least it will be in the near future. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Paul frequently has these thoughts. Is my friend now just a creature that serves me? Type thoughts. Let's see. So I forget if it was brought up earlier or in the near future, but at some point, it is mentioned that Paul plans to destroy, well, not plans, he plans to threaten to destroy all spice production on Arrakis. He who controls the destruction of something, or the ability to destroy something, controls that thing. And I think it's explained the way he does that is by using the water of life to create some sort of chemical explosion or something underground. I don't recall the specifics of it. The point here being he has that power. Sardaukar is brought in, and Paul realizes the Sardaukar have never been prepared for loss, so they don't know what to do because they've never lost. And it's a weakness he must account for with his own soldiers in the future. Loved that. Fantastic passage. Very cool. He sends for Jessica and Chani. We learn that Raban is dead. So there's not going to be a Gurney Raban fight, which I believe there was in the movie, which makes me sad for Gurney. Yet here we are. And I'm a little bummed we never did end up getting more of Raban, because for all of the Baron's opinions of him, I wanted to see if Raban really was smarter than we gave him, or he gave him credit for. Obviously, he was put in what is virtually an unwinnable situation. He was set up for failure. So, anyway, bit of a bummer on that end, but Raban is dead. Jessica walks in, and Paul notes that she appears to show no emotion for her son. And again, it's this hammering away at this idea that people are viewing him differently. And there's a part of me that is thinking to myself, was this not the plan? Were they just playing at war with no real intention to change the status quo? Or were they fighting to win? Not just to survive, but to win. I mean, this was a plan that Paul had mentioned in front of Jessica to Kynes way back in part 1. So a little bit of Jessica's frequent disconcertion with her son, I don't entirely know what to make of it. But there's a little bit of frustration. Then again, I can only imagine it must be disconcerting. It's one thing to talk about doing a thing, it's another to do it. And I, of course, acknowledge she's approaching it from the point of a mother. I would imagine no mother wants their son to become what Paul has become. And she, who frequently says, I had my part in making you as you are, she has to wear that or live with that. So as I speak, I'm becoming perhaps a bit less frustrated with it. Really interesting interaction. Alia is out there killing Harkonnens, and there's a line about people not recognizing the hidden unity of kindness and cruelty. And there's a lot of philosophical big brain ideas here in these last parts of the book that I kind of just want to sit with for a while. I don't know that I can offer any unique commentary on it. I think it's just that, something to sit with and live with, make a part of you, and move forward from. Paul no longer denies being the Kwisatz Haderach. Paul intends to marry the princess, Irulan, presumably. Paul and Chani reunite, and Paul worries about losing Gurney as well. So he's fearful he's lost Stilgar, his friend, Jessica's mother, and Gurney, his friend. Gurney informs Paul that he found Hawait with, I think, some Harkonnens, and Hawait insisted that he be left with them. And at this point, I wondered whether or not Gurney informed Hawait of Jessica's innocence. And we do get an answer to that later on, which I'm very glad for. But it's enough for now to know that that is where my mind was, and Gurney and Hawait had met. The Emperor and his entourage are brought in. Paul notes Feyd-Rautha. Then he sees someone he never saw in a single prescient vision, Count Fenring. And he fears this man. And he realizes in every death he sees in prescient visions, he never sees how he dies. And this elevated Count Fenring's cool points to me so much. One of the, I will not even say one of, it was the first thing that I did after I finished the book, was to check out Count Fenring's wiki page to learn everything, every bit of lore I could about him. Because I was like, who is this guy? What's his deal? I've got to know, and I've got to know now. He notes Irulan, and then Hawait walks in. Hawait and Paul speak. It's touching. It's really touching. It invokes, I think, the first scene we have between the two of them, where Paul says something to the effect of, "My back is not to any doors." Absolutely loved it. Paul essentially tells Hawait, hey, if you have to kill me, please do so, and do it now. This is the time for you to do it. And Hawait refuses to kill Paul, and Hawait chastises the Emperor for thinking he would do such a thing, and Hawait dies. And I was exceptionally sad by this. That whole passage was a bit of a tearjerker. I liked Hawait, and he had been through so much, and his loyalty was never in question, and he got to stick it to the Emperor at the end there. It was a very emotional scene. Paul orders the guild members to contact the guild and send the armada away. And they give a bit of trouble over it. They're hoping to negotiate or what have you. And Paul thinks to himself, there's a quote here, the eye that looks ahead to the safe course is closed forever. And that's another one of those heady philosophical things to sit with, I suppose. The idea is the guild never challenged themselves. They only ever took the easy path, And because of that, they became stagnant. They don't know how to handle adversity. And that's what this whole book is about. People choosing the shore path, the easy path. Dune is a rough place for rough people where you learn to survive. Um, so that was an enthralling segment as well. Like this, the climax of this book, and there is a chapter, not a chapter. There's a line right before the fight where Paul is like, "This is the climax," and I'm reading it thinking, "Oh, this is so epic, so epic." And it really is. And it wasn't like in a lampshady way. It wasn't in a cheesy way. It just, for me, felt epic. Paul leaves Mohiam alive as the cruelest punishment that he can think of, that she will live knowing that he refuses to listen to her. Paul intimates his intention to marry Irulan, and Irulan is prepared to do it, but the emperor doesn't want to. Irulan says something to the effect of, "Well, this guy's worthy of you, clearly." She tries to accept, but the emperor doesn't want to. And Paul expresses his devotion to Chani, and he makes that clear to her, and she seems to accept it. Chani thinks very much of Paul throughout this. Very different from the movie, with Chani sort of disapproving and feeling, or appearing to feel, betrayed and frustrated and aggravated and sad by all of these things. Here, Chani is like, I know what you're doing and why you're doing. I accept it, and I trust in your devotion. Do you want me here? Do you not want me here? What can I do for you in this moment? So we get a very different Chani in the book. Gurney wants to kill Feyd-Rautha. Feyd-Rautha calls for a Conley, which I guess is that duel to the death, and Paul is prepared to duel Feyd-Rautha, and this upsets Gurney, and Gurney gets really, really upset. He's like, "You promised me my vengeance, and I want my day against the Harkonnens." And Paul pretty bitterly or aggressively responds, it's like, have you lost more than I have? You're not going to do this thing. You've had your day. I'm doing this duel. And there's a segment of this argument where I'm just like, I know, Paul, I know what you're doing, Paul, but I feel like Gurney could take it the wrong way, as if you're denying him his vengeance or something. So that was a bit of a concern I had. Not that I expect Gurney to betray him in any way. It's just he was very cold, harsh, and callous about it. But again, can't exactly blame Paul. It's a tense situation, and I don't know that any lesser degree of that, how that might have changed things. And I say this as if there's this presumption that Paul should want to not be cold, harsh, and callous. And I don't mean to intimate that, but it's just my observation that I was concerned for the nature of their relationship in this moment. Add on to that the knowledge that Raban is dead, and it wasn't by Gurney's hand. So there's that added element of Gurney probably has some degree of right to genuinely feel like he hasn't had his day of vengeance. So Gurney's upset, but he more or less accepts it. And Jessica basically says, Gurney, he's hard-headed. He's got it. He's going to do what he's going to do. And maybe like don't distract him from this point on. And Gurney is worried for Paul as well. There is that element there. So Gurney quiets down. Jessica tells Paul the code word to make Feyd-Rautha go limp, which is an excellent callback to And in the Duel when the topic comes up, to Feyd-Rautha using the code word in the gladiator battle earlier on in the book. Paul wants no tricks against Feyd-Rautha. Again, making that distinction between the two of them. It's an epic fight scene. There are feints within feints, schemes within schemes. Feyd-Rautha essentially exposes an area for attack, which Paul worries conceals a blade, which ends up being a feint in and of itself. It's this other side that has the blade, the hidden blade, rather. The Emperor's sword had some poison on it, but Paul can change it. It's a little bit lost on me. I think it's because he drank the water of life that allowed him the ability to change the poison within him. Someone please let me know if that's the case. Feyd-Rautha gets a little poisoned, I guess. There's some acid on Paul's blade, and this upsets Feyd, and Paul's just like, well, you had poison on your blade. I just acided you. There's a point where it looks like Feyd-Rautha is going to win, and oh, yeah. Paul is silent throughout the bulk of this fight, and Feyd is a talker, and Paul's like, yeah, I'm going to let him keep talking. It's going to frustrate him. The silence will continue to frustrate him. And it looks like Feyd-Rautha is going to win at one point, and Paul shouts out that he refuses to use the code word. And I guess this surprises Feyd-Rautha. I don't know so much that it's his unwillingness to use the code word. I don't think he was aware there was a code word. I think it's more that he just like shouted something randomly after all the silence. And Paul shoves the knife up through the jaw into the brain and wins. The Emperor, freaking out, asks Fenring to kill Paul. And this Fenring thinks this is something he could do as a matter of fact. But as a friend, he won't do it. As a friend to the Emperor, Count Fenring will not kill Paul. And Paul realizes that Fenring is a failed Kwisatz Haderach. He's a eunuch, so he can't have kids. But I guess otherwise he has similar abilities, all of the abilities that Paul does. And I guess it's because of this and his demeanor that he can hide himself from Paul's prescience. And there is a moment of empathy that Paul has for Fenring. Really, really great passage. I feel like I've said that a lot this stream, but I mean, really, this climax was great all around. There's a lot of Paul switching between Paul the Duke and Muad'Dib. And there are elements of that seems like a dirty distinction to me. I get why you're doing it. I support you doing it, but it's a bit sketchy. And this is with regard to the fact that Paul the Duke offered some degree of protection for the Emperor and his entourage while they were to talk these matters out. And every so often, Paul will make some sort of threat, and he'll just say, yeah, I, Paul the Duke, offered you protection, but Muad'Dib didn't. Anyway, Paul sends Chani and Jessica to negotiate with the Emperor over the dowry, and he insists on the Emperor's entire Chom Company holdings. Not a bad ask. And that's like the non-negotiable thing. He wants an earldom and Chom Company holdings for Gurney, as well as for Gurney to have Caladan as fief. So he'll be in control of Caladan. Excellent. Very happy for Gurney on that one. Titles and power for every Atreides man who survived. Everyone to a man, the lowliest of Atreides men. Good ask, fair ask. The Fremen are Paul's to control, and he intends to install Stilgar as governor of Arrakis. Excellent choice. Very happy for Stilgar. Paul intends to get to that later, though. Jessica wants some time for peace, but does not know what else. Maybe Caladan. I think Paul offers to send her to Caladan. She's considering staying in Arrakis on Arrakis for stability. Chani doesn't want anything, and she is reassured that Irulan will mean nothing to Paul. Thus ends Dune. And we get some appendices. There's a bit about Liet Kynes' father and how he came to start the process of terraforming Dune. And that window of terraforming went from somewhere around 500 years down to 350. So that's exciting for them. Appendix 2 was about the religion of Dune. We learn about the Orange Catholic Bible, I think, and that story, which was fascinating. We get a little bit about, in Appendix 3, the report on Bene Gesserit motives and purposes, which, I forget if it was in the first appendix or not. The big revelation that I was grateful for, that I had always wondered about, but never thought to ask, but I legitimately did wonder, the worms are the source of oxygen on Arrakis. So I was like, if there's no plant life, how are they breathing? I guess that's the worms. So very happy to know that. Yeah, and then we get report on Bene Gesserit motives and purposes. We get some little tidbits of information about, we get an almanac about Shaddam, Leto, Lady Jessica, Lady Alia, Vladimir, Fenring, and Raban. Let's see. Where did I put my phone? I wrote a few very quick notes in the Discord. Let me see if there's anything there that I hadn't brought up here. The Fenring stuff was really interesting to me at the end there. I want to know more about him now. Surprised about Paul's son, got that. Gurney on Caladan, Stilgar for Arrakis. Hawait's scene with Paul was wonderful. All the characters differ in such interesting and subtle ways from the movie. Yeah. My final assessment, I guess, on the movies are, I understand why some things were cut. It's sad to know how much was truly lost because it was cut. I think that first movie lost a lot by cutting the "there's a spy among us" plot line. I think that's I don't know when you would have fit it in, but I feel like that element would have elevated the first movie. And the first movie is great as it is, don't get me wrong. But I think it would have added just an element of immediacy and a more immediate tension I think. And yeah, the choice to have Gurney be the one to kill Raban. I mean, I guess I get why you would add that. Chani's change. We got almost none of Liet Kynes. Stilgar is a very different character. He's a worshiper pretty early on. In fact, it seems to me he's one of the ones that's really pushing the Paul is the Lisan al Gaib in part two. And as funny and humorous as it was to watch that, I really, really liked Stilgar, the father figure, Stilgar, the mentor, and I lament the tragedy of Stilgar's transition from that into worshipper. So I think we lost a lot with that. Alia and the Baron had me chuckling, and I mentioned why. Paul not using the phrase in his fight, and that whole fight, and this is the climax. Yeah. So I think I've covered all of that. Excellent book. I can now say that I am a person who has read Dune. I like that. I think whilst I house sit, I also brought my copy of the Aeneid. I will try and start that, and we'll see how far I can get into it. Uh, Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks. Bye.